I forced my boyfriend to do the dishes. So I'm lactose intolerant, like actually lactose intolerant. Not the kind where people are like, oh, I just feel a little bloated, I mean. The kind where if I eat dairy, I'm going to be stuck in the bathroom for like 2 hours straight, sweating and regretting every life choice that led me to that moment. It's not cute, it's not fun, and I've told my boyfriend this about 1,000,000 times. But every single time I make tacos for us, he does this thing where he goes on and on about how I'm disrespecting Mexican culture by not putting cheese on my tacos. He'll do this whole dramatic speech like he's some kind of food historian talking about authenticity and tradition and whatever. And here's the kicker. He's not even Mexican, he's white. Like his name is Tyler, and he grew up in the suburbs eating chicken nuggets and mac and cheese from a box. But suddenly he's a taco police. I've told him so many times to knock it off. I've explained that I'm not trying to disrespect anyone. I just don't want to spend my entire evening camped out on the toilet. I've even offered to make his tacos with cheese if he wants, but he always says no and then continues making the same stupid jokes. It got old after like the second time, but he kept going. So, last night we're having tacos again. I made everything from scratch, seasoned the meat, chopped up all the toppings, laid everything out nice. I was actually pretty proud of how it all turned out. We sit down to eat, and of course he starts up again with the cheese thing. I just rolled my eyes and ignored him because I was over it. I got up to go to the bathroom, just a normal quick trip, and when I came back to the table, something looked off. My taco looked different, like someone had messed with it. I picked it up and started pulling back the lettuce and tomatoes, and there it was. Shredded cheese buried underneath everything like he thought I wouldn't notice. I just stared at it for a second because I couldn't believe he actually did that. Like, what kind of person does that? Who tampers with someone's food? Especially when they've told you multiple times it'll make them sick. I looked at him, and he had this dumb little smirk on his face like he thought it was hilarious. I told him he was a raging douche canoe and just got up and went to our bedroom. I didn't even yell. I was just done. I heard him call after me asking what my problem was, but I ignored him and shut the door. I was so mad I couldn't even think straight. The whole kitchen was still a mess. Taco stuff everywhere, dishes piled in the sink. But I didn't care. Normally I'm the one who does the dishes after dinner because he cooks sometimes, and I figure it's fair to split things up. But last night he could handle it himself. I stayed in the bedroom the rest of the night. I heard him out there cleaning up, and he was slamming stuff around like he was the one who had a right to be mad. At one point, he came to the door and knocked, asking if I was seriously that upset over a joke. I didn't answer. A joke is supposed to be funny. Messing with someone's food knowing it'll make them sick isn't a joke. It's just mean. This morning, I still didn't talk to him. I got up, made myself coffee, and sat on the couch. He came out and immediately started complaining about how I forced him to do the dishes last night. He said it wasn't fair that I just left him with all the cleanup and that I was being overdramatic. He kept going on about how he does so much around the house, and I never appreciate it. Which is rich coming from the guy who thought giving me diarrhea was peak comedy. I told him if he didn't want to do the dishes, maybe he shouldn't have messed with my food. He said I was being ridiculous and that it was just a little bit of cheese. It wasn't going to kill me. I asked him if he'd think it was funny if I slipped something into his food that I knew would make him feel like crap. He didn't have an answer for that. He just muttered something under his breath and walked away. We still haven't really talked. I spent the rest of the morning stewing. Every time I thought about last night, I could feel my stomach tighten, not from lactose this time, but from pure irritation. Tyler had this weird habit of thinking pranks or jokes were funny, even when they crossed boundaries he didn't understand existed, and honestly, I was starting to realize he had no concept of personal space or respect when it came to food. It wasn't just tacos, it was the principle of it. I called my best friend Sarah, vented for 20 minutes, and she didn't even try to sugarcoat it. She just said, "Girl, he's an idiot. You did the only adult thing possible." Walked away. Let him stew in his own cheese-infested mess. I laughed because, really, she was right. But then I started thinking about all the other times he joked at my expense. Like the time he replaced the sugar with salt in my coffee for a laugh, or when he put hot sauce in my cereal bowl one morning to spice things up. It wasn't cute, it wasn't funny, it was mean, and it had to stop. I decided that tonight we would have a serious conversation. Not a fight, not a debate, not another passive-aggressive exchange. A sit-down, adult conversation about boundaries and respect. I texted him around 5 p.m. We need to talk tonight. About food, respect, boundaries. No interruptions. He replied almost immediately with okay, but don't get mad. I was just kidding. I ignored that last part because, clearly, he didn't understand why this wasn't a joke. Fast forward to dinner. I made tacos again, just to see if he'd learn his lesson. I was careful this time, no cheese in my portion, double-checked everything, and even set my plate slightly apart. I could see Tyler eyeing the cheese with that same dumb smirk, probably thinking, she'll cave. He didn't. I didn't say a word, ate my tacos in peace, and then, when he started his usual history of cheese and Mexican cuisine speech, I stopped him mid-sentence. Tyler, no. Sit down, we are talking now. Not later, not tomorrow. Now. His eyes widened, because he thought he could just argue me into submission like always. I took a deep breath and started calmly. Last night was not funny. You know I'm lactose intolerant. You knowingly put cheese in my food after I explicitly said it would make me sick. That's not a joke, that's disrespectful, that's crossing a line, and I am done tolerating it. He tried to interrupt, started muttering something about it being harmless, and I shut him down immediately. No interruptions, you listen. I will not make a habit of explaining why basic respect matters, but apparently it's necessary here. You are responsible for your actions, Tyler. You cannot decide for me what is okay to eat in my body. That's the rule. Period. He shifted, uncomfortably, looking like he was used to me backing down. Like this was the first time I actually held my ground. I continued, because you don't seem to get it. I am spelling it out. If you ever tamper with my food again, there will be consequences, not threats. Actual consequences. You will clean the entire kitchen, do laundry, and yes, I will find other chores for you, because this isn't just about dishes, it's about your lack of respect. He tried the old, but it's just cheese line again, and I laughed, but it was not a joking laugh. I looked him dead in the eye. It's not just cheese, it's the principle. Do you understand me? He nodded slowly, finally realizing that this was not going to be brushed off with a sarcastic grin. I added, and if you ever think it's funny to make me sick on purpose again, I will seriously reconsider this relationship. I will not be with someone who thinks it's funny to abuse my trust and my body for a joke. That got him quiet, dead silent. He muttered an apology, the first genuine one I've ever heard him give without sarcasm. I didn't celebrate, I just said, good, now do the dishes, and we'll talk more after everything is clean. For the next hour he slammed pots and pans around, groaning the entire time. But at least he was doing it without complaining about me forcing him. I even helped him carry some of the heavier stuff, but I didn't say a word about the past. That conversation had to be strictly about boundaries, not revenge. After the kitchen was spotless, we finally sat down. He started apologizing again, trying to explain his jokes, and I listened. I told him I appreciate the apology, but jokes like that are off the table. You've learned your lesson, hopefully permanently, because next time, it won't be a lecture, it will be consequences I actually enforce. He nodded seriously this time. I didn't know if he'd change, but for the first time, I felt a shift. He realized I wasn't a pushover. That night, as I went to bed, I felt a weird sense of relief. Not only did I protect my digestive tract, but I also stood up for myself, in a way that made it clear I am not to be toyed with, not when it comes to my body, my health, or my respect. Tyler didn't sleep well that night. I could hear him tossing and turning, probably replaying the entire confrontation in his head. The next morning, he made my coffee, quietly, without spilling anything, and didn't complain when I refused his suggestion to add cream. Small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Over the next few weeks, every time tacos were on the menu, he kept his hands off my plate. No complaints about culture. No jokes, no passive-aggressive comments. It felt really peaceful. I even started to feel more confident asserting myself in other areas. Because if I could get him to stop messing with my food, maybe I could finally hold him accountable for other annoying habits. And the best part, I realized that forcing him to do the dishes wasn't punishment, it was a symbolic gesture. It was me reclaiming control. Every time he scrubbed a pan or dried a plate, it reminded both of us that boundaries matter, that mutual respect matters, and that crossing lines comes with responsibility. I didn't have to yell, I didn't have to storm out, and I didn't even have to get vindictive. I simply let him experience the natural consequence of his actions, while keeping my dignity intact. And honestly, it felt empowering. I'm starting to understand that sometimes, you don't need a dramatic showdown or a huge fight to teach someone a lesson. You just need to stand firm, make them face the fallout of their own choices, and refuse to participate in the nonsense. Tyler finally got it. I don't think he'll ever mess with my food again. And if he does, well, the dishes can get a lot more intense. Story do they tell you the hardest thing in life is losing a child? They're wrong. The hardest thing is having to choose which one needs you more. My name is Michael Harris, 42 years old, high school English teacher, father of 3, or I was. My eldest, Caleb, was diagnosed with glioblastoma the week after his 9th birthday. I remember the day like a tear-stained photograph. The kind with faded edges and fingerprints smudged across the glass. His little brothers, Eli and Evan, twins, were 6 then, full of laughter, loud footsteps, mismatched shoes, and questions no parent is ever fully ready to answer. But when Caleb got sick, those questions changed. Why is Caleb losing his hair? Why doesn't he come outside? Why does mommy never visit? I told them everything gently. Except the last one. There wasn't a gentle way to explain that. My ex-wife, Jenny, divorced me 2 years after the twins were born. I wasn't rich enough, sharp enough, ambitious enough. She wanted more than a teacher. She found a real estate broker who drove a Tesla. A man who didn't quote Steinbeck or Frost at the dinner table. Someone successful. She got custody. But when Caleb got sick, could barely walk, barely eat. She didn't want the burden. She wanted freedom. So I took all 3 boys. I found a small rental house near the hospital. I took unpaid leave from school. I walked away from everything. Friends, career, health plans to care for my dying son. But someone had to watch Eli and Evan, and I had no one except my parents. They lived in the same town, retired, tennis twice a week. Book club Sundays. Their only grandkids right here. Falling apart with me, I called. I begged Dad just for a few weeks, Mom. I need to be with Caleb. He doesn't have Michael. We're not equipped for little kids anymore. My mother cut in. You're a grown man. You can figure it out. Besides, your father has plans. The fishing trip. We can't cancel that. They hung up. They never called back. Jenny, I tried her next. She laughed. I told you weren't cut out for this. You're just a broke teacher. Figure it out. So? I did. I learned how to love the way we learn to breathe underwater because we have no other choice. I built forts in a hospital room. I read bedtime stories in a plastic chair. I held one child's hand while the other just slept in the rental living room, wrapped in blankets like forgotten dreams. But cancer doesn't negotiate. It doesn't bargain. It doesn't care if a boy's father loves him. On the last night, Caleb looked up at me, eyes cloudy under the fluorescent light. Dad, yeah, buddy. Don't be alone. I held him until his chest stopped rising. And I broke. That was 2 months ago. Now, it's just me and 2 boys who look at me with questions I don't have answers to. Some nights I sit in the dark kitchen at 2 a.m. with a bottle of cold water and think maybe this is all there's ever going to be. Grief, emptiness, a quiet house where calendars don't matter anymore. Until one day, I made a choice. Not to die, but to live for them. 1 week after I buried my son, I was standing at the sink washing a single cup when I heard a knock at the door. Steady. Not urgent, not frantic, just present. When I opened the door, I saw the last thing I expected and everything began to change. The door creaked open beneath the weight of a knock that still hung softly in the air. I wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no neighbors dropping by. Grief had a way of making people forget you existed. So when I saw the man standing there, I froze. He wore a navy baseball cap. Not a team logo, just plain. His jacket looked like it belonged to another time. Faded denim, elbows weren't thin. His face was lined. But his eyes were kind, the kind you rarely see anymore. The kind that made me think of someone who had lived a life worth listening to. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me with a sort of silent understanding, like he knew why my shoulders were tired, why the house smelled like stale coffee and old sadness. You Michael Harris? He asked, voice low and steady. I nodded, though something clenched inside me. My guard went up instinctively. Too much had happened, too much loss. I wasn't ready for another hit. And you are. He pulled a faded wallet from his jacket pocket and flipped it open. Not a badge, not a business card, just a photograph. A younger version of the man in uniform, navy blues, hat tilted, a ship behind him. Named Walter Bell, he said softly. I served with your father in the Pacific back when living each day felt like a dare. My stomach dropped a little. My father never talked about the war. He talked about fishing, about property taxes, about what a good long drive could clear from a man's head, but not the things that mattered. My father doesn't visit much, I said carefully. Did he send you? Walter shook his head. Where are you watching from? Comment your city. I love seeing this community grow. No. He never asked me to come. He looked down then, almost ashamed. But your mother did. That stopped me cold. I hadn't heard her name spoken with warmth in years. He reached into his jacket and slowly pulled out a sealed envelope. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, but well preserved, sealed with wax. She asked me to give this to you if I ever found you. Said it was for a day when you'd need it most. His voice softened. She said you'd know. I reached out with trembling fingers and took the envelope. It felt fragile, like truth wrapped in time. I'm sorry it took me this long. Walter added, your mother wrote me after your divorce. Said you were alone. Said she feared it wasn't the last time life would test you. His eyes misted a little. She was right. But she also said you were stronger than you knew. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The doorway felt like a bridge between two worlds. The past I'd been running from and the future I no longer knew how to see. Why now? I finally asked. Walter stepped back and looked up at the sky as if searching for the right words. Because some losses carve something out of us, he said quietly. But others leave room for something new. I figured it was time. He tipped his cap, a simple gesture. Respectful, apologetic, real. Take care of those boys, Michael, and let this letter do what it's meant to do. He turned and walked away. Slow, steady steps down the sidewalk, disappearing into the early afternoon light. I closed the door in silence as my heart pounded in my chest. I carried the letter to the kitchen table. The same table where I had graded essays and drawn pictures with 3 small hands. The same table where grief had sat with me night after night. I sat and opened it. Inside was a single handwritten note, folded once, ink soft from time, but clear enough to read. My son, if you are reading this, you have survived something I feared as much as I feared cancer itself. I feared the world would break you. But I always knew you would rise. Don't let what you've lost define what you become. What's gone is not the end. What remains is a reason you must continue. That's where your strength lives with love. Mom, I breathed in deeply then again. And the air didn't hurt quite like it had. In the quiet of the kitchen, with sunlight spilling through dusty blinds, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not joy, but a beginning. I sat there at the kitchen table. The letter from my mother resting in front of me like a guiding light from a star. That had burned out years ago. For a long while, I just stared at the words, letting them settle where something inside me had long gone numb. What remains is a reason you must continue. It was the kind of sentence only a mother could write. Not a command, not a plea, just a truth, quietly offered and meant to be carried. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the worn black journal where I kept the poems I never shared with my students. Poems about love, loss, and the quiet courage it takes to stay when the world tells you to leave. I carried myself up the narrow stairs to the second floor, where Eli and Evan were still asleep, piled into the same bed like puppies. One drooling on the pillowcase, the other curled beside him, arms wrapped protectively like he knew they were all they had left. I stood in the doorway and just watched them breathe, slow, deep, safe. Something shifted inside me. Something subtle but strong. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was deciding. That morning, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank page of a new email draft. Then I typed a subject line I never thought I'd write again. Returning to teach fall semester. I didn't know if the position was still open. Didn't know if I was ready. But I knew this much. Caleb loved books more than video games, more than holidays, more than even baseball. And God, he loved baseball. The last time we sat together, I read him The Giving Tree. His eyes fluttered closed with each word. I didn't know it would be the last story I ever read to him, but it was. And now I wanted to give something back in his name. I pressed send, and then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed. A bank notification. At first, I thought it was another overdraft warning. Another reminder that the bills were rotating like vultures overhead, waiting to swoop. But when I opened the app, I froze. $148,000 incoming wire transfer. I blinked, refreshed the page, checked the account number. Then checked again. There in the reference box were 4 words that nearly made me fall to the floor. For the future, Mom. My hands began to tremble. It wasn't from Walter. It wasn't from my father. It was from her. The woman who never owned fancy jewelry. Who clipped coupons. Who taught me that love isn't always loud, but always certain. My mother had left something behind. Something only a woman who knew the cost of sacrifice would save. Quietly, steadily, purposefully. She had left it for this moment, the moment she feared I might give up. I sank into the chair, the old one with the wobbly leg, and let the tears fall. Not the hollow ones that follow tragedy. These were different. These were like the first raindrops after a long drought, promise. I didn't know exactly how she'd managed it. Small investments, maybe hidden accounts, scraps of money salvaged from years of living simply, but she had done it for me, for them. I went upstairs and sat beside the sleeping twins. Eli stirred, opened one eye. Dad, we okay? He mumbled. I brushed the hair off his forehead just like I used to do for Caleb. Yeah, buddy, I whispered. More than okay. That night, while the boys were curled up on either side of me, watching Home Alone for the 100th time, a line from my mother's letter floated back into my thoughts. What remains is a reason you must continue. She didn't mean the money. She meant the love, the boys, the future, the quiet courage to build a life again. Not in spite of loss, but in honor of it. And that's when I made a promise to Caleb, to my mother, and to myself. I would not just survive, I would live. The next morning, I called my father. He let it ring 4 times before answering, his voice sounding older, almost brittle. Michael, I know you heard I said about Caleb's silence then. Yes? I'm sorry. I should have. I cut him off gently. Don't apologize. Just listen. I took a breath. I'm done measuring my worth by who stayed or who didn't. I'm done expecting anything from you. This isn't a fight. It's just clarity. He said nothing. I wasn't speaking for him. I'm raising the boys on my own now. And I'm going to do it with love. The kind you only understand when you've lost it. Another pause. I heard a shaky breath on the other end. Michael, I wish I'd done better. So do I answered. Then I hung up. I didn't call for forgiveness. I called to close the door and open a new one. Later that week, someone knocked again. This time, it was Murdoch Daniels, the high school principal. He stood on my porch with a folder in hand and a look that wasn't pity, but respect. We want you back, he said. And we want to set up a scholarship fund in Caleb's name. I think you might have ideas for that. My throat tightened. He would have liked that. I managed. We'll have the boys enrolled, too, he added. Glancing toward the living room where Eli and Evan peeked around the corner, shyly, spying on us. We'll make it work. You're not alone, Michael. I nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time, I believed it. The house still held echoes of Caleb, his drawings were taped to the wall. Sunflowers, dinosaurs. Crayons applied with the conviction of a child who believed everything he imagined could come to life if he drew it big enough. At night, I still passed by his empty room and paused just for a heartbeat, wondering what it would be like to see the light under the door, hear his laughter again. But something else had begun to grow in those shadows, light, little by little. Life hadn't stopped hurting, but it had started moving. School called me back. The twins started second grade at the same school where I taught. I couldn't always stop myself from glancing at the empty desk on the far wall, the one I kept clear for Caleb, as if saving him a place. Some wounds never close, but over time, you learn to live around them. We talked about him often. Me, Eli, and Evan at dinner, in the grocery store, folding laundry, lying in bed during thunderstorms. Would Caleb like this color? Do you think he could beat us at Mario Kart? Where do you think he is now? Simple questions, honest ones. They didn't hurt like they used to. Not anymore. It was a Friday evening, late October, when the knock came. The wind was restless, sweeping the leaves along the street in amber currents. I was stirring a pot of soup on the stove while the twins sat on the kitchen floor, building robots out of old milk cartons and glue sticks. The knock was gentle, almost hesitant, the kind that makes you stop washing the spoon midair. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door. When I opened it, I froze. It was Jenny. She stood there in yoga pants and a coat that probably cost 3 months of my teacher's salary. Hair done straight, manicure perfect. It would have been easy to think she came from a spa appointment if not for the thing she couldn't hide. Her face was cracked with guilt. Michael, she said, voice trembling. I didn't speak. Behind me, Eli and Evan peeked around my legs, curious, cautious. They'd barely seen her since the divorce and almost never since Caleb got sick. I drove by 3 times before I stopped, she whispered. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't invite her in. But I didn't shut the door either. The wind blew a little harder. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice before falling quiet. I heard about Caleb's scholarship, she said. Through the school district, someone mentioned the memorial bench. She swallowed hard. And I realized when he was dying, you called me and I laughed. Her voice broke. She put a hand to her mouth. I didn't just abandon him. I abandoned all of you. The tears didn't surprise me. Not because I expected them. I didn't. But because I had long stopped waiting for her to say anything real. And here she was. Human, broken, late? So late, but honest. I don't deserve forgiveness, she said quietly. I know that. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. The boys stood silently behind me. I could feel their small bodies leaning gently into mine. To anchors holding me steady. I looked her in the eyes. You're right. You don't deserve forgiveness. Her face crumpled. But I'm not here to punish you either. I added. Not anymore. She blinked through tears. You can leave the guilt behind, I said. But you can't erase what happened. Caleb's gone and nothing changes that. She nodded. A small, slow acknowledgement, a quiet surrender. But there are 2 boys inside, I added, who still need to know the world is full of people who won't walk away from them. Her eyes widened, a new kind of grief settling in. If you want to be in their lives, I said slowly, you start small. You show up, you stay. You listen. And if you can't do that, you leave now. Quietly, she wiped her face, straightened her shoulders. I'll try, she whispered. I nodded. Trying is all I ever asked for. I left the door open just a crack and turned back into the house. Eli and Evan looked up at me, expecting, waiting. Who was it, Dad? Evan asked. I paused, then did something I hadn't done in months. I smiled, not with joy, but with peace. A second chance, I said. That night, after the boys were asleep, I sat alone by the window in the living room, a cup of tea in my hands. Leaves tapped gently against the glass like soft reminders of the turning season. On the coffee table sat the journal with my mother's letter. I opened it to the page where her words had been left waiting. Patient like her love. What remains is a reason you must continue. I closed it gently. What remains? 2 sons with dreams, a classroom full of minds waiting for stories. A bench under a maple tree with Caleb's name carved into its side. A life rebuilt, not in spite of pain, but because of it. I didn't realize I had started to cry until I felt the warmth on my cheeks. Not tears of sorrow, tears of grace. The kind you earn by refusing to quit. People always think that healing is loud, a roaring comeback, a dramatic rebirth. But sometimes healing is knocking gently at your door and asking to come in. If this story moved you, if you felt the betrayal, the justice, or the redemption deep inside, please take a moment to hit like. It tells me the story mattered. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words don't just echo, they inspire the next story. And if you believe in stories that stand for truth, loyalty, and poetic justice, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell.